Welcome back, I'm Ryan from Bluewood Gaming, and today we are taking a look at Talisman Digital Edition, and it's called that because this is based on an actual board game called Talisman, of all things. Who would have guessed? Now, you're seeing it in the background, so let's just jump right into what you're actually seeing at this point, and that is the board for Talisman. You will see this every time that you play. This is the only board that there is for it. It's pretty much about as complicated as you want to make it. Every time that you go to a different square and move, a new thing happens that you draw randomly out of a deck of cards, and different things are drawn depending on where you go to. And then there's 4 separate sections outside of the main board. There's the city, the quarry, or actually it's a cave, and then the mountain pass. Now there's different things that you do at each place. Essentially what you're trying to do to win in this game is either have everybody else except you die, which is the most common way to win, or to get all the pieces of the talisman and go to the center section of the main board and pretty much win by just going there, which is pretty dangerous in its own right. But let's just talk a little bit about these graphics. Now, this isn't really something to bring up much in this because it is a board game and the graphics don't really matter that much, but all of the pieces look almost exactly like what they look like on the actual board. The only difference is on the physical board, there's a bunch of explanation boxes on every single square, telling you what decks to take cards out of to draw whenever you go on there, and different things, and like what happens when you go on it. That's not there. That just saves room. The actual physical board looks a little cluttered with all those boxes, so it's a good thing that they took those out. And unless you're playing on a really, really old version of the board, what you're seeing in this game is the actual 1-to-1 scale board that you play in the actual physical game. If you take a look at what the board looks like, how it has the wizard tower in the middle, then the inner region and the outer region, all of those blocks are pretty much one for one what they are on the physical board, just brought into this digitally. So next, let's move on to some of the more intricacies of the actual gameplay. Now, this is very, very complicated, and you can read through the whole extensive rules online. I'm just going to kind of shorten this. Essentially, you choose from one of about 12 to 15 characters. They all have different stats and abilities. This is kind of set up like an RPG, and think of it going into it as an RPG. Where you're actually trying to do different things depending on which character you're playing as. If you look at mine, I'm currently playing as the knight. Now, my character's special ability is that he gets to use 2 weapons during combat, so his attack score gets to go up even higher, and he tries to win physical-based fights, where there's other ones that try to either damage you without fighting, or just try to completely avoid you, or try to steal things from you, or just different things. And I don't know the intricacies of all the different characters. I've only really had time to play 2, which is the knight and the thief. All of them, though, pretty much play fairly differently, and there is some DLC that I'll talk about later that actually adds more. But moving into some of the things that you can see on the screen, going along the left side is all the people playing. Currently in the footage that you're seeing, it is just myself and my friend Nick playing with 4 AI. Although I recommend playing with a group of at least 3 actual humans. This game is actually sold as a 6-pack, so you can actually play it with you and 5 of your friends, which I highly recommend. This is a fun enough game to do it. But you're seeing all of the different characters that we are playing as. Then it shows the actual icon, knowing what kind of class we're playing. Next to that, you will see either a green, a white, or a red kind of strip right next to it, and that just shows what the character's kind of alignment is. It's either the white is good, the green is neutral, and the red is evil. So pretty simple. That comes up in a few places where you can't talk to people if you're not neutral, or you can't pick something up if you're good, or you get a some sort of downside if you're evil. It just depends on what you're going for. Then moving on, next to it in the red box is the player's strength. In the blue box, you have craft, which is essentially a different version of strength. If you're not a strength character, then you try to improve your craft ability. This is what kind of like the sorcerers and stuff use instead of strength. Then down below that in the green box is the number of lives that you have. You normally start out with around 4 depending on your character. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 5. Yeah, that's your life. When that gets down to 0, you're dead. You're out. You can no longer play. Getting all your opponents down to 0 wins you the game, so that's a pretty good thing. Next, when it's your turn, you will see 2 boxes. A purple one, which shows your faith. Well, not your faith, but your fate. That's it. Fate pretty much allows you to re-roll the dice whenever you want to. It uses up 1 fate point when you have it, and it's kind of hard to actually get fate back. More so when you're playing with the Reaper on, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. And then down below that is the gold box, which, funny enough, it's your gold, which you use to buy things. Pretty simple. Sometimes you go to, when you're in a city, you can give gold to people for services, but yeah, it's pretty much you use gold for what you think you'd use gold for. Moving on down below where all the characters are, the circle button pretty much is just a button that expands out all of the character menus and pretty much lets you have a quick look at what everybody else has with them, whether that be companions and followers or items or some sort of special trinket. That just lets you quickly fan it all out so that you can see what everybody has and then close it all back quickly. Then down below that in the bottom left corner is the day and night card, which actually lets you see how much time will be before it becomes either night or day, depending on what time it is. And then next to that is the victory condition card, which I don't really look at too much because the victory condition is normally just kill everybody else. So yeah. Then in the middle on the bottom is the information box. Essentially, this is what they took off of the physical board. Whenever you click on a square, you'll see what it has to say about that said square. Down below that is just an index to look up things, and then the bottom thing in the middle, that's the flashing quill. It is the text box for talking to people back and forth. This is the in-game text chat, although a lot of people don't really look at it all too much just because it overlaps where the information is, so you'd rather be looking at the information and trying to make good plays than look what other people are saying. Excuse me. Moving on to the bottom right, you have the 3 different big decks, or actually it's the 2 main decks, and then the red one on the far bottom right is a whole bunch of different decks just condensed down into one little icon on the screen. And those you don't really have to look at too much. It's just there to show that cards are drawn from a deck. There's no real purpose to clicking on each of them, although there is an ability that lets you look at the top card of the decks, and that can sometimes come into play, but it's not really much for beginners to worry about. Then moving up is a button that you will eventually see on when it's actually your turn. This is just the roll dice button. It only shows up when it's your turn to roll dice, and not really all that important. It's also the travel here button and different things. It's just the accept button. Then above that is the magnifying glass, just more of an explanation if you need it for any particular thing. And then above that is the actual settings button, and then up on the top it tells you what you're supposed to do, whether to be to move or to roll dice or to choose something. So now let's move on and talk about the actual board. In the center you will see the Wizard's Tower, which once you have all 3 pieces of the Talisman, then you can go there and win the game. Then you have the Inner Circle, which is essentially just a more difficult version of the Outer Circle. Then you have the actual Outer Circle, which is just where you go around. There's towns on each of the corners that you can do special things in, and then you can just encounter normal things on the countryside in between each of those cities. Then outside of the Outer Circle, you have the 3 extra things that you can see on the corners of the board. Now, I've actually seen games with only 2 of these things on the corners, and I've seen games with 4 things on each of the corners, and I've seen it how it is now with 3. I haven't ever seen one with 2 or 0, but yeah, I don't really know much about that. But what's on this board that you can see in the top left corner is the city. This is where I like to spend a whole lot of time in. You can generate a whole lot of gold pretty quickly there and get a whole bunch of weapons kind of soon there. And when my general strategy is just to get enough strength to kill everybody else, that's normally where I want to go. Down in the bottom left of the board is the mountain pass. You pretty much go there to defeat a boss which has one of the pieces of the talisman. So if you're going after that, then you're going to have to go through the mountain pass, which is a pretty terrible place to have to fight through. It's kind of just like a dungeon to fight through. And then on the top right is just the caves, which is another dungeon to go through to get the second piece, and then you can get the third piece of the talisman actually in the main center board. Then there's a 4th piece that can go down on the bottom right, but I have no clue what it's ever about. I've never seen it played, and I've never played the physical version of this board game, so yeah, I don't really know much about it. Moving on, there's 2 things that you will see moving around that aren't characters on this actual board. That is the Reaper and the Werewolf. I believe you have to play with the Werewolf, but I believe you can turn the Reaper off. Essentially, this is just things that you move around occasionally that can do bad things to people. There's an instant death thing. If you roll a 1 on the Reaper, there you can instantly die and lose all your lives, which is kind of funny, but that's kind of the reason why people don't really like to play with the Reaper, because you want to, when you're playing with the Reaper, you want to conserve your fate so that you can do rerolls on the Reaper in case you instantly die, or if you meet the Werewolf. Sometimes you don't want to fight him because he's pretty powerful. Sometimes you do. Sometimes there's an upside to becoming a werewolf because you can actually become kind of a werewolf. You don't actually transform into one. You just gather the disease to be one. Sometimes there's actually some benefits to becoming one, and sometimes there's not. Most of the time, there's not really a benefit to becoming one. It's mostly just a downside. Moving on, let's talk about the sound really quickly because there's not really much to talk about. Every time you move, there's a sound for moving. Every time you roll a dice, there's a sound for rolling dice. All the basic things that you would expect. Really, it's the only standout thing that's not really so standout is the music, which I actually turn off just because it's a whole bunch of just generic fantasy music that you would really expect from something like this. They don't really go above and beyond for any of the music. It's all just really, really generic stuff that I would expect to see from like a mobile game ad or something like that. It's all just serviceable, and it just works, is pretty much the best way that I can put it. Now let's move into talking about the replay value, because why would you play a board game the same thing over and over and over again? Pretty much the reason why I keep coming back to it is because it's a fun thing to do with friends, and it takes quite a bit of time to actually do it, so you do get to stay with your friends quite a bit. Just talking about the average time, a normal game for me with only 2 human people takes right at about an hour and a half. I've heard that some games go on for about 3 to 4 plus hours, so make sure that you do actually have the time before you play this game. Really, I would recommend this game for a whole group of friends, but don't just get it if it's just you, because you will find it boring after a while, or at least I would find it boring after a while if I was just playing it with a bunch of AI. But like I said earlier, they actually sell this game as a pack of 6 for only $30, so pretty decent. I would totally get it if I had a group of me and 5 friends that were looking for something to play for a while. It is definitely worth the value if you're going to be playing it with a whole bunch of friends. Now, before I end off this video, there's one last thing that I really want to touch on that might scare a few people away, and that is the DLC and expansions that come with the game. Now, some of the things that I've been talking about have actually been DLC, and part of the good thing about it is only one person really has to buy these main expansions to actually get them in-game. Like, the city itself is actually an expansion. There's the Highland, which is the place that was down in the bottom left that you can see. It is an expansion. The dungeon, which is up in the top right, is also an expansion. There's several different things. I'll just run through them as they show up on the Steam page. There's one called the Netherrealm. Is essentially adds in 3 new alternate endings and 36 cards. That's just more of that. Then there's the actual city, which adds in a whole new place, which I would almost say is mandatory to play this game. Then you have a bunch of character packs. Currently, there's, I believe, 13, which is the Jester, the Goblin Shaman, the Illusionist, the regular Shaman, the Exorcist, the Courtesan, Devil's Minion, the Genie, the Martyr, the Gambler, the Black Witch, the Apprentice Mage, and the Shapeshifter. Those are all different characters that add a whole new way to play the game, and those are each like $2, and Then there's an expansion for the werewolf itself and for the Reaper, which you have to add on for those. There's a DLC to get the complete set of runestone cards, which is some more cards to add on. Essentially, what I'm saying is there's quite a bit of DLC for this game. Now, I recommend getting at least like the city and the dungeon and some of the other places at the very least to play the game, because the game's kind of not all that engaging when it's just the stuff by itself. But the upside is, if you're playing in a group, you only have to have one person, whoever's going to be the host of the game. That is the only person that has to buy the DLC. And when you look it up on Steam, it says that the actual DLC is like $130 worth of DLC. You can actually bypass that and just get the season pass, which costs $60, or your regional equivalent, and that gives you all of the DLC that is coming out, because there's still new releases being brought out, even though this game is 2 years old, and all of it that is come already. And so far you're already saving like $10 if you buy the season pass. So yeah, I'd recommend it if you have a group that's playing and wants to continue playing for quite a while. Just note though, if the host has the season pass, all the other people don't get access to the characters. The people that want to play as a special character have to buy the characters themselves. But like I said, they're only $2, so it's not really that expensive for a new character. And that is it for this. Remember, I'm writing from Bluer to Gaming. I've been kind of busy, so I haven't really been able to put up some videos as often as I want to, but kind of getting out of this spurt of being really busy, and things are kind of going back to normal, so I'll have some more regular uploads, and I'll see you guys at next one.